to shoot. All right, I guess we're on, right?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Just in case you guys don't know, I'm Byron, and that's Charlie. A lot of times people get us confused when they look on the cover of the book. Sometimes they say which one is which, so I thought I would clarify that right away.
Well, but before you clarify, I have
just
to
did.
No, you haven't. I have to clarify why I'm holding the basketball and Byron's holding the briefcase. And there was a big argument around which made more sense. And the reality is, I'm a better shooter than he is in basketball. So we play a basketball shooting game, and this can't leave the room. Everyone okay with that? What starts
The first
in the room?
thing it's going to do is leave the room, Charlie. It's social media, it's going to leave the room right away.
Okay, so Byron has one problem when he shoots. It takes him about 3 shots to get his range. Now, that's a backdrop to why I'm a better shooter than he is. We play a game where you get 1 shot. I shoot from the free throw line. He shoots from the NBA three-point line. If I hit, he misses, then I've won the game. The game's over. If I miss and he hits, he wins. If we both hit, it goes to a second round. 6 times in a row, I hit the shot, and 6 times in a row, he missed on the first shot. Now, we used to play 21, and after he misses the first 2, he hits 11 in a row. I've never beaten him in 21. But I have won 6 in a row, and that allowed me to have the basketball and Byron to have the briefcase.
The real reason he's holding the basketball, guys, is because the briefcase has stuff in it that's way too heavy. That's why I'm holding the briefcase. He's a businessman. He has stuff in the briefcase. So that's why I'm really holding the briefcase, to be honest with you.
So before we start, I want to make one shout out, and I want to introduce Linda Rush, who's right here in the blue. Linda was the head of human resources at McKesson Water when I was running it, and she's here as a fact checker. So if you don't believe anything I say, talk to Linda and she'll tell you the truth about what happened.
Linda, stand up, Linda, real quick so everybody can see who you are.
And she is prominently spoken about in the book because she maintained my sanity during quite a few years when we were in a reorganizational mode at McKesson Water. And she was just a wonderful, wonderful colleague and supporter. So the first thing we wanted to do was to explain how the two of us are sitting here and how we became friends. And the thing that, first of all, we were introduced by a mutual friend. But I'm a Bostonian. I'm a Laker hater by background because I was a Celtics fan. And I came to California feeling that I had to root for the Clippers because I was a Laker hater my whole life. And I would watch Byron. We worked out at the same gym, and I would watch Byron. And I was actually a little impressed with what I saw because initially I was thinking, oh, he's another one of the LA bling people and he's going to strut like all the other celebrities. But I found that he was really focused on working out, but he was also very generous of time and spirit. And as I first met him, what really got me was the fact that he knew the names of the people that were picking up the towels in the gym. When we'd go downstairs and have an orange juice or a smoothie, he knew the person who was handing it to us. He knew that person went to night school, whether they had kids. He knew people. And one of the things that I feel really strongly about as a leader, and I would sit here and say everyone in this room is a leader and should be thinking about how you can be leading. And the first part of that is getting to know the people around you and getting to know them in a way that gets to you, not only their heads, which is critical when you are creating a vision and then trying to get an organization to support it. But you can't do that if you can't get to the hearts of the people. And Byron epitomized for me someone who, even from a distance, I saw cared about people. And the other thing that is consistent with that drives so much of it, is that there's no such thing as a dumb person. We learn things in different ways, but very quickly you know if somebody's real or somebody isn't real. And what I saw right away is that what Byron was doing wasn't because it was the right thing to do, it was because that is who he is. And that was what drove me to want to get to know him and become more open and ultimately create the relationship and friendship, that we have today.
Trying to get more money out of me, aren't you?
Well, that's another thing that I'm
Okay, but listen. Now, when you look at us sitting up here, the one thing that we always talk about that is really funny is that, when we were introduced, it was by a mutual friend, which was great, because if you would have came in the gym and we were working out together, or we were just friends, and you said, that's Charlie Norris is over here. You said, B, do you think you could be, good friends with him? And I would look at him and probably go, nah, I just don't see it.
What do you mean you don't see it?
I just wouldn't have saw it.
I'm sitting here.
Well, now I see it, but I just wouldn't have saw it. Now, when we brought this question to Peggy, his wife, Peggy said, well, the other side of that coin is B. He would have said, if somebody would have said, you think you can be good friends with Byron? He would have said, probably not, but I would want to. And
other than the Laker
stuff. And then when we met, a few things that Charlie left out is that when we started working out together. And when we started working out together, I'm looking at this man and going, okay, this sounds great. We want to do some cardio and stuff like that together, get to know each other. And then I wanted him to start lifting weights with me because he said he wanted to lose weight. And one of the trainers said, no, Charlie, he's right. If you want to lose weight, you need to do the cardio and the weight training. I was scared to death because I'm looking at him going, I'm going to kill him. If we start lifting weights, I'm going to kill him, And everybody in the gym was saying the same thing. They said, what are you doing? Why are you guys working out together? Why are you guys laughing so much? Why are you having so much fun? And when we were working out, we started asking each other questions and getting to know each other. And each day we seemed to get closer and closer. And what people didn't realize is they're looking at the outer part of us and they're wondering, how in the hell are you two having so much fun? Why are you together? Because they see this tall, dark, handsome man over here. And they see Charlie. So.
Excuse me, why are you laughing so hard?
But seriously.
I'm here.
You know what I mean, right?
He's insulting me and you're laughing.
No, because he understands. He's probably been in my shoes. He understands. So, they would look and just look at us from, just the outside looking in. They're looking at us like they don't have nothing in common. There's no way these guys should be having fun. They shouldn't be together. And they were afraid to ask the second and third question. And what we talk about a lot in our book is when you want to get to know somebody, forget about the height, the size, the width, the color, whatever it may be. Forget about that. Put that to the side and get to know what that person is all about. That's what we did. That's all we did. And we found out that we had a lot in common. I found out that this old geezer is about as competitive as anybody I've ever been around. I mean, he wants my money because he wants to beat me in cards. That's his thing.
Well, it's not wants to.
Okay,
he is.
He takes my money because yeah, okay. We'll go that route because he is. But the thing that we both had in common is that we wanted to get to know people. We both have that thing in common that we want to get to know people a little bit deeper than just how you doing, what's your name. We want to get to know a deeper part of that. Get to know what you're all about. Get to know what your likes and your dislikes are. And that's what we did. We really took the time to start to get to know each other. And in the process of doing that, we started working out. We started setting these goals about working out and doing 3 hours of cardio one day. We wanted to build up to that. We accomplished that. Then we said, all right, let's do it again. we accomplished that again. And then we're sitting on the mat one day, and I'm kind of going into how this book got started. We're sitting on the mat, you know, we're both drenched. You know, he has not a spot on his shirt that's not wet. And he would go home, and Peggy was like, "You were working out with Byron today, right?" You know, because his shirt would just be, you know, drenched. Yeah. And we're on the mat, and we're laying there, and Charlie says, after another person comes by and said, "What do you guys have in common? Why are you working out?" And he says, "I think we have a book here, B." And I said, "Yeah, I think you're right." Now, my thinking, of course, is a little different than his thinking. So when he said that, the first thing that came to my mind was, yeah, Charlie, I think we do. I think we should get a book, and we should call it How to Work Out When You're 50 and Over. Honest, How to Work Out When You're 50 and Over. I said, we should get a lot of pictures. You know, we can get a couple of trainers in here that we know, and they can kind of, you know, put their stamp of approval on it, and we should just give it out around the club. Because most of the people in the club are over 50 anyway. So that was our thought.
They act that way.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, they do. We act like we're 30 sometimes. And that was the initial thought. And then Charlie has a friend named Todd Smith, who's now my friend as well, that he said, you know, B and I are thinking about doing a book. And he said, well, I think that deserves at least a lunch. And we met for lunch. And now Todd is one of these other guys that thinks way outside the box. And he starts saying, I'm thinking television, I'm thinking a major book deal, I'm thinking radio, you know, he started just going off on this tantrum, and we were sitting there like, we really just think about this little paperback book. And 2.5 years later,
here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
Yeah. When Byron became head coach of the Lakers, we started working out in the Laker facility instead of working out in the gym. And he had me sitting in on film sessions with the players, coaches' meetings, practices, and he would start bouncing questions off of me. And questions about, I'm having issues with this player, or what would you do in this situation? And I said to myself, it's interesting that he's asking me when he has all these coaches, but for him, he would get a coach's answer from all of the coaches he would ask. I'm a business guy. I come at things differently than them. Sometimes my ideas might be totally off the wall. Sometimes they actually resonated. And I thought, I better do the same thing going the other way. So I started to invite Byron to go to bank meetings and board meetings, and he even went out with our salespeople for dinners with buyers of the various retail chains that we were selling to. And we really started to get into each other's businesses from a leadership perspective. And it was almost like Tuesdays with Maury every day in terms of, well, I had this problem, what do you think, Byron? Or he'd ask the same to me. And we actually then decided, okay, we're serious about a book, and we put down about 15 leadership aspects that we felt we had in common. And then we, through this friend Todd Smith, he introduced us to William Morris Endeavor, who got us to a ghostwriter who sat down and wrote the book with us. And the way he wrote the book, it's all in first person. We're telling real life stories, where we've been successful, where we failed, in all cases, what we learned from it. And he interviewed us for over 2 weeks for 40 hours. And he introduced other people, interviewed other people who had done business with us, Linda being one of them. And as he was interviewing us, he was thinking about what each chapter was going to be based on a particular leadership aspect. And it was easy for him, after he got it after you
transferred it or translated it?
Transcribed, thank you. After he got transcribed, it was easy for him to start writing chapters because it was our voices. And what we thought we'd do is take 5 or 6 examples of different leadership skills that we think are really important and tell you why and tell stories around those, if that makes sense for you folks, as a way to get inside our heads and inside what's in the book. So one of the areas that we think is absolutely critical as a leader and as how you deal with an organization is getting to not only the heads, but getting to the hearts of all of the people that you're working with. And the most important people, certainly in organizations that I've been involved with, but I think it's true across any industry, across sport, is that the frontline people are the most critical people in a company. So at McKesson Water, where Linda and I work together, we started with 2,500 employees, and the company, when I was hired, was really in a very difficult position because they were making more money every year, but the business itself was really struggling because they were losing market share in order to make 5% more money every year to have that go to the parent company, McKesson Corp. And when I was hired, I came on the heels of a series of CEOs who believed in command and control. And in command and control, data is the gold that you have, and you want to hide it because that's the only thing you have that separates you from the next person, because everybody has limited knowledge going forward. And Linda, who had been with the company for, 25, 30 years at the time, and was already head of HR, said to me before I started, if you aren't willing to make change, I'm going to quit. That was my first conversation with Linda Rush, that this is just not working. And I come from the East Coast, and you had a whole group of people who thought they deserved the job, and you had an organization that was in the middle of a union organizing drive. And what was missing is that nobody asked the frontline people what was wrong, what was right, what needs to be changed. And you had a whole group of route sales reps, a whole group of customer service reps who were dealing with the end customer every day. So what did we do to change it? First thing I did, the first decision I made, there was one reserved parking space in the whole parking lot. It was for the CEO. I eliminated that reserved parking space. Why? Because I wanted the organization to know that I was no different than they were, and my job might be a job as the CEO, but my job isn't more important than anybody else's job in the organization. We then flipped the organizational chart, and we had what we call an upside-down pyramid organization with the frontline people at the top and me as CEO at the bottom of the organization. And I went out, and all of the senior managers went out at least once every 3 months on a route in different parts of the country, had to deliver half the bottles, had to knock on doors for new business, do everything that route rep was doing, and spend the whole day hearing what the route rep was saying. We had, every 3 months, you had to go into the call center and talk with customers and answer calls for a whole day, and again, talk to other call center customer service reps to determine and learn what they were going through and what was working and what wasn't working. And little by little, we got the frontline people to start telling us what really needed to change. And that led us to be able to flip the whole organization, and it was $200 million in value. When I got there, we sold it for $1.1 billion 10 years later. And it was driven by having everyone in the organization knowing what was important, and also everyone had a voice. And no matter what you're doing, if you can't get the people around you to have a voice and know that you care, you're not going to win as a team or as an organization.
And it's no different in basketball. You know, when I'm coaching, I have normally 3 or 4 assistant coaches. You might have a video guy. You might have a couple of scouts, you know, things of that nature. So it's a small group of people. You might have 10 altogether. And it's the same as Charlie's talked about. One of the things that I try to do is delegate the authority for those guys to do their job. Let them do their job. You know what I mean? And I want to give them the confidence to go out and do their job. So when we're having our coaches meeting, which he was, like he said, he was able to sit in on for a number of them, which I thought was great, because you know, you see this little bitty guy over here, because our chairs are kind of small, and you could barely see Charlie probably from this way up, but neither here nor there. But anyway,
is that in the book?
No, that's just me because you're messing with me about the money. So when
he's a hating, you know?
So when I have these meetings with my guys, you know, what I used to hear about a lot of coaches in the NBA is that the head coach would want to do everything, which I think when you're trying to do everything, you're going to fail. You know, he wouldn't delegate to his assistant coaches. Assistant coaches couldn't work out players. Assistant coaches couldn't do this. They couldn't go over scouting reports. And my coaches were all given 4 or 5 teams that they had to be accountable for. And they had to write up the scouting report. And they had to bring the scouting report on how we should play this team when we play. Because from a coaching standpoint, being the leader of the team, I'm looking at every single game. I don't have time to go over every little detail with every team. So I want you guys to do it. And what that did is gave them the authority and the belief that I trusted them, I have faith in them to go out and do their job. Now, once we come together and we're going through all the lists, you know, obviously I have the final say, but 99% of the time, I would say, we're going to do it your way. You scouted that team. You know that team better than I do. Let's do it that way. Now, if it doesn't work, at halftime, I'll make an adjustment. But it goes to just what Charlie said, getting into the heads of the heart and having the trust and belief in the people that are working with you, and them also, you know, buying into it as well. That means you're going to, you know, put out a better project. And so we really felt all the years that I was coaching that that was the most efficient way to do it, you know, with the staff that I had. And most of the guys that I had, I kept for years. You know, when I went from Jersey to New Orleans, staff changed a little bit, but from New Orleans to Cleveland to LA, the staff stayed pretty much the same, with the subtraction of 1 or 2 people in addition to another couple of people. But for the most part, it stayed pretty much the same. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. I don't want you beating me in cards. I'm just, for some reason, that's sticking in my mind, Charlie. It's just sticking in my mind.
We stopped for lunch and played a hand of liar's poker.
That's
what's killing us, because he paid for lunch because I won that hand of liar's poker. Don't let him fool you. What's bothering him right now? He doesn't remember yesterday's loss. He's worried about today's.
I lost yesterday?
Yeah, I think we did.
Oh, I did lose yesterday.
Yeah. So another aspect of leadership that we think is really important is the subject of risk. And risk comes in all different sides. And from my perspective, for an organization to really thrive, you need to have an organization of risk takers throughout the organization. And you can't be a risk taker or ask other people to take risk if you're not willing to accept failure and manage failure. And the way we both think about risk is that I want someone, and let me start with when I'm interviewing for people to come into an organization. One of the questions I'll always ask is, tell me, obviously, the arc of your career to date, and what have you done well, but speak to me about where you failed and what you've learned from your failures. And if someone says to me, well, I'm really having a hard time thinking about an area that I failed in, I would never hire that person. In fact, that would be one of the shorter interviews I would typically have, because everybody, if you're going to be successful and separate yourself as an individual or as a company from the people you're competing with, you're going to do it because you're doing something different that makes you have a product that's different, have an offering on how you sell it, how you make it. Something's going to be different, or you're all going to be pretty well equal, and then the lowest price wins. And the lowest price typically doesn't win long term in terms of growing your profitability and making your company more valuable. So once you have people around you who you're comfortable or willing to take risk, it has to be calculated risk, obviously. There has to be good reason. But often you're not going to be successful. You're going to fail. And you want to celebrate the failure from the perspective of what you've learned that will make you a better company, and you won't do that same thing again in the future. And we spend a lot of time around that aspect in the book. And it holds true in everything you do, and it's equally true in sport. And B, I know you have some history around that.
Yeah, I think I failed more than Charlie has failed when it comes to sports. The first head coaching job I took, Bill Walton, you guys know Bill Walton, very outrageous, outspoken personality. Bill told me, first of all, they told me it was crazy for me to take the job in New Jersey. They said you're going to fail. That's the worst job in the world. That's the Clippers of the East. Now a lot of you in here have only seen the Clippers since they've been successful, since Chris Paul and Blake and all those guys got there. I got drafted by the Clippers, and I got traded to the Lakers before I ever put on a Clipper uniform. And I thank God every day. And one of the reasons is because everybody that was with the Clippers back in our day when I was playing was getting hurt. So I was about as happy as can be to be traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. Okay, but when we talk about failure, taking head coaching jobs, the saying in head coaching jobs is you get hired to get fired. Simple as that. So I took New Jersey to 2 championship games or series and get fired. I go to New Orleans, I get coach of the year. We have the best year in the franchise history, you get fired. I go to Cleveland where they said, we got about 4 years and get this right. The third year they decide, we're going to go a different way, you get fired. Coming to Los Angeles and really don't want to go into all the Los Angeles stuff because I'm going to be pissed off. But got promised, 3 years or more, and boom, after 2 years you get fired. And Charlie knows this better than anybody. That night when I got fired, that was my dream job, first of all. So any of you who have ever gotten a dream job or something that you really, really wanted, didn't have it taken away from you, you know how painful that can be. And it took me about an hour and a half to say, okay, that's over with. Let's get ready for the next chapter. So as much as we talk about celebrating those failures and learning from them, you also have to be able to have short-term memory. Because once it's over, you can't sit there and ponder about it and what it should have been, or I'm pissed off about this, or I'm mad at this guy. You have to move on. And one of my greatest attributes as a person is being able to forget it and go to the next phase. And I saw him, I think, the next day at Equinox, working out. And it's crazy because that day everybody was scared to say something to me. For the first time, nobody wanted to say anything to me. I don't know if they thought I was going to snap or what, And I was in a great mood. I said, listen, I got over this last night at about 10 o'clock. Time to move on. So, like Charlie said, everybody has failures in their lives. It's just how you deal with them and how quickly you can get over them and how quickly you can move on. And the reason that he's been so successful, the reason that I've been successful is because, number one, I've taken those risks, and I understood that if I do fail, I'm going to be okay. But the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it 110%. I'm going to make it work to the best of my ability. And that's what I've been able to do, and that's what Charlie has been able to do. That's why we wrote this in the book, because we didn't want this to be a book that's preaching to you. Number one, it's not, because it's really just talking to you about our life experiences and some of the things that we've been through. But we didn't want it to be an all just feel-good book, because life is not like that. Right, Charlie? I mean, life is not, you're going to have these in life, period. And it just depends on how you deal with it. So that's one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about failure and how you get over failure. And we wanted to put that chapter in the book.
Yeah. Now, I've had the fortunate experience of working internationally for a number of years, and I worked in I was based in Switzerland. I was with Nestle International, but I launched products in Japan, Nigeria, Malaysia, the UK, and the person who headed up the Far Eastern zone for Nestle gave me one piece of advice when I went to Japan before we developed a product to launch there. And the piece of advice was, because someone doesn't speak English, don't assume that they're not bright. Now, that's an easy thing to say. It's hard to often to embrace that in a meaningful way going forward as you're trying to get people to answer questions. I needed an interpreter all the time. And the ones who spoke English, it was easier to think, well, they're smart because they can speak to me in English. I then went to Nigeria, and when I got there, someone smartly said to me, you should know there was a study done comparing Japanese children with Nigerian children. And they did the study first. They'd tell a story, and then they would, they would have a story and have the kids read the story, and then they would ask questions to these children based on what they had read. The Japanese children absolutely demolished the Nigerian children in terms of their success rate with the questions. They then took the same story and told the story rather than had them read the story. And the Nigerian children destroyed the Japanese children. So what did I learn from that? What I learned is that everyone is smart. They may process things in a different way. And you are going to be really successful if you can understand how the people that you're working with process information so you can give it to them in a way that they can embrace it and understand it better. If you can't do that, then you're not going to be successful as a leader. And it all comes back to not accepting the first thing you hear from people. You have to get into the second, third, fourth level of questioning to get to what people really mean from what they say. And as we become a nation here of just multiple ethnicities, multiple cultures, it's more and more important because every one of us eventually are going to be leading groups that will not be homogeneous groups. And as a leader, it is critical that you know how people that you are working with, how they process information and how they learn. And one of the great things that I learned from my international side was that active listening skills trumps all. And that is really, really critical. And B has exactly the same issues with the 15 players that he's coaching.
Absolutely. Like Charlie was just talking about, from my standpoint, you got 15 guys, and you're trying your best to find out which way is the best way to teach them how to learn. And we're talking about plays. We're talking about defense components that we want to learn and teach the guys. So sometimes, and we do this, and Charlie's been a witness to it. You got a room full of guys, and you got to make sure that you cover all these areas. So number one, you want to show it to them visually. Being on the basketball court, going through it, because some guys get it when they're on the basketball court. Some guys get it in film session. Some guys get it when you write it down on a board. So you have those three components that you have to try to figure out which guy is which. And then once you do that, then you have a much easier way of teaching these guys how to play as a team on the basketball court. But it's a difficult thing because some guys have one and some guys have two and some guys don't have any. It's really difficult to do, but the thing that we would do on a night-to-night basis and a day-to-day basis, that we always felt the more we can give them, the more that we can just consistently push them into learning these things, and they see it on a day-to-day basis, then obviously the more they can gather, and it becomes easier for them to learn it. So he's absolutely right as far as in business and in basketball, there's a parallel when it comes to learning, because I didn't think I had dumb players. I just thought I had players that needed for me to find out which way is best for them as far as teaching.
How are we doing on time? Are we okay?
Yeah, we're good. We have 15 more minutes for you and then 10 minutes for that.
Oh, great.
Oh,
So-
he's going to take up this whole 15 by himself.
Do you need to go take a nap?
Nah.
So one of the other areas that people have in every aspect of their life is negotiation. And we talk a lot about negotiating, and we both strongly believe in the concept of win-win. And now there's a school of thought of win-lose is an in thing with certain pundits. And what I have found is that you can't win-win, again, if you don't know what the other you don't know exactly what you want out of a negotiation, what your needs are and how far you can go. But of equal importance is to know what the other person you're negotiating with, what their needs are, and how you can help them get to win on their side. If you can't do that, you're going to be in trouble. The second part of negotiating is you're never going to be in good position if you don't have time on your side. If you need something done very quickly, you're at a huge disadvantage. And the more time you have, the better off you are. And the third thing is you have to be able to walk away if you don't get to what you want to get to. So how does this manifest itself in reality? In the bottled water industry, there are less now, but when I was active in it, there were a lot of small family-owned companies that would be perfect acquisition targets for you to go into a new geographic area. The problem we had was we were the big Goliath, and oftentimes these family-run businesses might have the husband and wife both working in the office, and they might have 6 or 10 employees running routes, but everyone that was working for them was family. And they didn't want to necessarily sell out to the big guy for fear that the culture was so different that all of their people would lose their jobs, that they wouldn't be able to work in a more sophisticated environment. So there was one company that we really wanted it was out in the Central Valley. Linda, do you remember this one? And we went out there, and that's another thing. I always felt it was better to negotiate on the other person's turf than on my turf, because when you're on the other person's turf, they're more relaxed. When you're on your turf, the people are going to be more assuming that you're going to try to take advantage of them, and they'll be less open to hear what you're saying. So we went out on a couple of occasions to this company, and finally we were at the point where we were going to start talking about truly negotiating to buy the company. And I said, let's go outside, and we ended up sitting on the back of a flatbed truck, which was his pride and joy. It was his truck. He ran routes occasionally, and we negotiated on the back of the truck. And finally he realized that, again, like where we started on having our people run routes, that we were no different than he was. We understood the business the same way he did, and even though we were bigger, we weren't better, we weren't different, and he sold the company to us. And that wouldn't have happened if we had him in our office or tried to do it in a way that wasn't comfortable for him.
That's pretty good, Charlie.
Thank you, B. What do you have? What do you have to talk about?
Nothing?
So I'll tell you. Want me to tell another story?
No, not really.
Okay.
No, I do want to jump into something else in the book that Charlie and I both feel very strongly about, and that's setting goals. You know, and everybody in here, as Charlie said this earlier, everybody in here is a leader in your own way. You know, no matter if you don't think you are, believe me. But setting goals is something that we are both, you know, feel strongly about. And like we said, when we were working out, you know, we would always set goals. You give us something to try to achieve. At 12 years old, you know, I was 12 years old when my dad asked me, or my mom asked me, what do I want to be when I grow up? I came running upstairs because I had this trophy I just won. Trophy was about that big. It wasn't no bigger than this water bottle. But it was like my pride and joy. It was the first trophy I ever won. And I ran upstairs, and my mom and dad were there, and they were so proud of me, gave me a big old hug. And my mom said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be in the NBA. I said, you know, I want to be I want to be a basketball player. And my dad being dad, he said, well, what if you don't make it? I said, I'm going to be a baseball player. So obviously sports was in my future, is what I was thinking about. But what I ended up doing, obviously, is I made it. But even at 12 years old, that was my goal. But I didn't know the steps or the necessary steps to get there. I just knew that was the end game. And we always talk about, you know, when you set those goals, you know, everybody sets high goals or high standards, and you should. But once you set them, now you got to take a step back and realize, okay, now how and what do I have to do to reach it? And at 12 years old, obviously, I had no clue. I just knew that I had blinders on, and I played basketball every day. I didn't think I was 12, so I didn't think about girls. When I was 16, I thought about them, but I didn't want to do nothing with them. So I thought about just strictly basketball. When I got to Arizona State.
Is that absolutely true?
It is absolutely true. When I got to Arizona State.
That's not what I heard.
Listen, when I got to Arizona State, I thought about basketball, but all of a sudden girls started being a priority too. But they wasn't number one. Basketball always was my number one priority. I didn't allow anything to get in the way of that dream. That's what I wanted to accomplish. So everything on the outer part, you know, didn't matter to me because I wanted to reach that goal of getting to the NBA. I told some young kids this morning, that was the easy part. Reaching that goal was the easy part when I look back at it. Staying in the league for 14 years was the tough part because every year somebody was coming after me. Somebody wanted my job. You know, so I told these kids this morning, I said, you know, there was one night when I would run this certain route around my neighborhood. It was like 5 miles. And when I was training, there was no fast food, there was no drinking, it was training. And I would run this 5-mile course. And one night I looked outside, you know, before I got dressed to put my shorts and everything, and I looked, and it was pouring rain. And put my stuff on anyway, and I'm like, well, maybe in 10 minutes it'll stop. 10 minutes later, it was still pouring. So went outside, ran my 5 miles. I came back, I'm laying on the porch, and I'm huffing and puffing. My wife comes outside, and she said, are you okay? I said, I'm fine, I'll be in a minute. I go in the house, she said, why would you do that? Why would you go out and run, and it's pouring down rain? I said, because there's somebody in Florida that plays basketball, in probably my position, that's running right now, and it's nice and sunny, and he is not going to get the edge on me. That was my attitude. That's how determined I was to not only get in the league, but to stay in the league until I left on my terms. And we really talk a lot about that in the book, about just setting those goals. Now, the reason we talk about failure, because what if it doesn't work out? You get right back up and you do something else. And I know it sounds easy, you know, but for us, there is no other alternative. You know, if we fail in something, we just get right back up. But setting goals are so important. Write them down. Write a 5-year plan down. Because that's what I used to do all the time, is write a short-term, 5 years down. I went to Israel one year and wrote 5 years, put it in this little wall, wishing wall. It was before I got my second contract with the Lakers. I was playing really good. That summer I went to the wall, wrote down, I'm going to tell you exactly what I wrote down. 5 years, $5.5 million is what I want. Put it in the wall. Jerry West came up to me and said, what do you want? Before you answer that, think about it, because I was about to answer it. Think about it, I got 5 years, $5.5 million. So it's important that you write them down and that you believe in them, and then you go at it 110%.
One of the takeaways that we hope people will get from the book is that, and this group is studying leadership, studying business. Being successful in business and being successful in sport is exactly the same thing in terms of there's a scorecard. You need to have the same teamwork to be successful in business. You're trying to get market share from your competition, and if every time the share come out every month, if you're up, you're winning. If you're losing share, you're losing. I know that Byron will find this probably surprising, but it's easier to do what I do and be me than it is to be him.
That's not surprising.
Some days I wish I was him. There are
Some
other
days I wish when you sell a company for $1.1 billion, I wish I was Charlie Norris. There's a lot of days I wish I was Charlie Norris, believe me.
But the point is, the similarities are throughout every aspect of leadership. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you have to, if it's for you personally or for a business, you have to set a goal. You have to make sure everyone around you is supportive of that goal. And one of the key things that this was both success and failure with my dad, who was obviously one of my mentors. He was great managing people below him. He was terrible managing people above him. And in order to be successful, everyone around you needs to understand what the goal is, needs to embrace the goal, needs to embrace the steps that are going to be taken along the path to get to your goal. And if you can't get that complete agreement organizationally, the odds of you getting there are diminished, because there will be people that are blocking or not supporting what you're trying to do. And that is really a critical thing that we can't stress more strongly, that we all have to be thinking that way. Are we still good, or are you about to?
We're ready to take questions. Thank you very much for bringing all your wisdom and experience, and we can take a few questions. And Byron and Charlie are going to be signing books. These books are complimentary to all of you, so be sure that you are here afterwards for the books. So if you have a question, wait till you get the mic.
So I think your basic premise is that leadership can be learned. So that's given that some leaders are not as good as they can be. So if you have a leader, suppose you're working for a leader, how can you improve the relationship with that leader so that your relationship with them is better, and then they're essentially learning what's in your book?
I think that you need to understand what that person's goals are and how you can align what you're doing to those goals. If the person you're reporting to or the leader of the organization hasn't done a good job of describing where he wants the business to get to, I think it's incumbent upon you to try to get him to articulate that. Because at some point, you won't be successful if you are in the dark trying to figure out what that person is looking for from you in the role that you're playing. So you have to get that alignment. And honestly, if you can't get that alignment, you might want to be looking to be working somewhere else, because it won't be a rewarding experience for you. Does that make sense to you?
Just shout it out. We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah. Anyway, no, it's already.
Oh,
okay,
okay.
perfect. Great. Mr. Norris and Coach Scott, thank you guys so much for coming in. Huge fan. My name is Matt O'Connor.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I think you know a lot about, Coach Scott, is leading superstars, right? Whether it be Kobe, Chris Paul, whether it be Baron Davis or Jason Kidd, right? Mr. Norris, you have the same experience in business, leading stars. How do you effectively lead kind of a superstar? How do you effectively motivate a superstar?
Well, you know what? The thing about superstars like those guys that you just named, Kobe is the most successful out of those guys, and Chris Paul is probably next. They don't need motivating. That's the one thing about those guys. They are self-motivated. I was self-motivated as a player. But from a coaching standpoint, the one thing about those guys that you got to understand is that if you don't know what you're doing and you don't feel confident in what you're doing as a coach and you're not portraying that to them, they will see right through it. So my thing was always, when I stepped on the court, you're going to know as a player, and I'm the coach, that I'm in charge. You're going to know it. You're going to know it by the way I talk. You're going to know it by the way I walk, by the way I act, that all decisions are going to be made by me. You can suggest, just like we talked about, Kobe, we would be in, I'll give you a prime example. We were playing Golden State in Golden State, Kobe's last year, obviously. And Jim Irons is my defensive coach. And Jim is talking at halftime about, this is what we're doing defensively, guys, and blah, blah, blah. And Kobe said, wait a minute. How are we doing this, Jim? And Jim rolled it, ran the tape back and showed it. Kobe said, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. He said, if we do that, then, Steph Curry's going to kill us. And Jim kind of was like, okay. And I'm standing over there like, you the defensive coach, handle it. And Jim said, well, it's and Kobe said, no, we can't do that. We got to do it this way. And Jim kind of looked over at me. And I said, Kobe, we're doing it this way. It ain't killed us so far. He said, no, they're going to kill us second half. I said, then if they kill us, I'll make a change. This is how we're doing it. Simple. End of the conversation. But if I as a leader back down at that particular point, and you got to understand, and it's probably in business as well, most superstars are going to test you anyway. They're going to see if they can get over, or they can see if they can, as the young people use, they're going to see if they can punk you. Kobe knows me. I'm from Inglewood. I don't get punked. I just don't. I'm from Inglewood, California. I don't do that. So just that example right there, number one, it told me that Jim, I know if it wasn't Kobe, you would have handled it, but even if it is Kobe, handle that. That's your job. But since he didn't, and I didn't do this at all those 2 years that I was in LA, is that I jumped in and handled it for him because I didn't want him to be put on the spot like he was. But superstars are tough to deal with because most of them are great players and they got great basketball IQs. That's why they're great, because they got a different way of thinking the game. I saw that with Magic Johnson. I saw it with Chris Paul. Saw it with Kobe. Saw it with Jason Kidd. So it is a little bit different to manage those guys. But me, I didn't treat him no different than I would have treated, Jordan Clarkson if he would have said the same thing.
One of the differences in business in that regard is today, with the flattening of organizations, you have to find other ways to feed your superstars, your best players, your best performers. And the way one does it is by increasing the span of control, or give projects that are projects outside of what their normal day-to-day activity is, to keep people motivated and keep them really learning. If you can't provide that, then you're going to lose your superstars.
So keep challenging them.
Oh. Hi, thank you both for your talk. Coach Scott, you spoke of your ability to move on from failure as one of your best attributes, but can you describe how you learned as a leader from one of your failures, specifically the process of introspection that takes place after such a failure, and how the outcome of that process leads to improvement in your next challenge and personally?
Well, that was a lot of questions there. Let me see. Well, obviously, the first time you're working like I was in New Jersey and you get fired after the success we had, I really kind of took a few days to kind of figure that one out, because that was hard to process because I just said we just went to two, NBA finals and we got off to a shaky start, in the next year, but I really felt that, we were still okay as a basketball team. So to accept that one was a little difficult at the time because I'd never been fired from anything in my life. I really had to kind of sit back and evaluate, some of the things that I did. I never look in the mirror and say it was this guy's fault or this guy's fault. I want to look in the mirror first and say, what did I do wrong or what could I have done better? One of the things that I felt I was probably a little too iron fist when I was in Jersey. I come from the school of learning from Pat Riley, Larry Brown, and those guys, and it was more of a dictatorship. It wasn't a democracy. So in the new age of basketball, I thought that I probably was a little too headstrong, as a rookie coach. And at the time, I was only 36 years old. So I was going by what I knew and what I had witnessed. So that's one of the biggest lessons I think I learned when I got let go by New Jersey is that, you have to change a little bit. Sometimes it's hard. Persona doesn't work with some people, but some people it does. So I had to learn how to deal with players and not treat everybody the same, so to speak. I knew there were guys that needed a hug, and I knew there was guys that I needed to put my foot up their butt too, and I knew which ones could take it, and I knew which ones couldn't. So that's what it really taught me the first time that I got let go, and it really prepared me, for my next 3 jobs, to be honest with you, because when you get let go like that, you do have to take a self-evaluation. You really do. You have to look back and see, all the success we had, there was something that I wasn't doing right. What is it? Let me pinpoint it. Let me recognize it, and then let me try to obviously correct it the next opportunity I get, and then you just move on again.
Being here and huge Laker fan. I grew up close to Inglewood, so
See, there we go.
Question, I love what you said about just being focused on your goal, and I'm sure same for you. And how do you make sure that on that way to your goal, you don't get distracted by the negative people that want to bring you down, whether it be family or friends or sometimes girlfriends or boyfriends or even spouses, or you choose the right spouse to make sure they support you appropriately, and just anyone around you, in particular, friends again and family, and make sure you weed out those people that are not going to be part of your journey because they just want to bring you down.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know Charlie can answer this as well, but for me, I was very blessed growing up in Inglewood that I had about 4 or 5 friends that I hung out with, and they were tremendous. They were all very positive, and the thing about these guys is basically they protected me from myself at times, because when we were out and about and stuff started, they would be the first to grab me and say, B, you got to go. You're going to be the one guy that can get out of here, so you got to go. You can't be involved in this fight or this and that. They really looked out for me. But over the years, you will come across people who are negative, that want to get in your circle, and it's a process. You got to learn which ones you can trust and which ones to weed out. You're going to get hurt by some, and you're going to learn from it, but I've always felt you got to surround yourself with good people. As a coach, you have to, your friends, you have to surround yourself. Charlie knows all my buddies, he's been with them, and he's one of them, matter of fact. He just didn't grow up in Inglewood. He, damn it, went to Boston. He grew up in Boston, unfortunately. But but it is a process, of going through, and a lot of kids, especially young people, they don't see it most of the time when they got somebody that's trying to pull them down. It takes somebody outside their circle to kind of say, he's not good for you or she's not good for you, and hopefully they trust that person. But like I said, for me, I've been very fortunate that my friends that surrounded me when I was in the 4th grade are still around to this day. And any event or anything that I do, I call them up and say, I want you to come out. If I'm having an event at the house, I want you to come over to the house. And that's like I said, Charlie's met them all. And to this day, they've never, you know, and I don't consider this meaning that you're a great friend. They've never asked me for nothing, but they're always there when I need them. And I'm there, you know, if they call me in the middle of the night and they need something, I'm there. You know, but I've had the same 4 or 5 guys in my posse since I was in the 4th grade.
Just a couple side notes. I also grew up in the New England area, so.
So who gave him the mic? I'm just curious.
However, what I was going to say is I don't think the NBA has ever had a better time when there was those Showtime and Celtic rivalries. I mean, those were just unbelievable.
I agree.
And you mentioned Coach Ian. His son attended Pitzer College, and I coached him here during his 4 years. And Coach Mr. O'Connor in the middle didn't tell you he was an all-star football player here either. But anyway, on to my question. Piggybacking on what you just said about the importance of good people around you, and you mentioned earlier the characteristics of people around you, but what are some other things you think about in the hiring process that you look for to help ensure that you are finding and putting those good people around you?
I think one of the most important things is you want someone who is looking to do the best job they possibly can in the role that they're being hired for. It's easy to tell when somebody is coming into a job and already thinking about what this job can lead to as the next job they're going to have. And there's too much distraction when that happens. To me, and I don't think that my situation is any different than anyone else's. I've had good bosses, I've had bad bosses, I've learned from both. But one thing that I've always felt is if I do my job to the best of my ability, there will be people in the organization that see that, and at the appropriate time, I will be offered other things to do. And I've stayed totally focused on what I was working on at that time. And I think through the interviewing, you want to see if someone has stayed in a job long enough that you can see real progress in terms of change in the performance of that company or that department, or what that person has done to influence over a period of time. I get really nervous on all the job hopping. If you see a resume with a lot of, I was 2 years here, 2 years there, and this is what we were just about to get to when I had this other opportunity. I don't believe that for a minute. And so you want people around you, and by the way, as an aside, Harvard Business School did a study of people who stayed with one company for their whole career and people who have done multiple job hopping from career to career. And at the end of the day, the people that have stayed in the same general role going forward have done better long term than the people that have been bouncing around. But back to the point, you want someone who has shown stability, has shown real growth in terms of what they have accomplished and what they've learned, and what they have learned from both success and failure. And people that when I interview and when we do follow up, we're talking to people that reported to that person as well as people to whom they reported. And you often get the best information from people who reported to them regarding where, what they are truly as a leader and what they've accomplished and what they're taking credit for that they really didn't do. And you often get a lot of that as well. Is that helpful to?
Can I say one more thing? Because since he brought up New England or Boston, but you're right. The '80s were great. basketball, and this kind of goes all the way back to the beginning of what Charlie and I talked about. When I coached in New Jersey, Cedric Maxwell, anybody know Cedric Maxwell? Remember that name, Cornbread Maxwell? Cornbread? He was their radio guy. And he sent our PR guy over to me to say, tell Coach Scott I want to do a radio interview with him. And a guy named Bobby, he says, Coach Scott, they want to do a radio interview with you. I said, who's they? He said, Cornbread Maxwell. I said, tell him hell no. So he goes back, tells him no or whatever he said, and we don't do the interview. We come back to play him again. We had to go there twice. Asked for another interview. I said, maybe you didn't hear me the first time. Go back and tell him what I said last time. So he goes back and tells him again. We go there to play him in the playoffs. And Bobby's now like, Coach, please, you got to do this interview. You got to do an interview with Boston Radio. And he begged me. So I said, all right, I'll do the interview. So Maxwell comes in and he sits down and he's pleasant. Hey, Byron, how you doing? I'm good. That was my attitude. I'm good. And we started doing this interview. And after the interview, we sit there and we talk for like 10 minutes. And now I've realized, all these years I've been hating this guy. And now I know why. It's because he was just like me. He wanted to win championships. He didn't care about the name on the back of the jersey. He cared about the name on the front of the jersey. We had a lot more in common than I ever imagined. And it was all because we did an interview and I finally opened up to talk to this guy. Just like I did with this little munchkin over here back in the day.
Do we have time for one more?
He got to get the last word in.
You got to get the last word. Go ahead.
So I was trying to get Byron to come to Boston.
Oh, Lord, yeah. I remember. Okay.
And this was an ongoing dialogue between the two of us. And by the way, this story, or much of it, is in the book. But he had taken me to Inglewood and was showing me
soul food restaurants,
I'm telling the story.
Oh, my bad.
My
bad.
Showing me where he grew up. As B said, I got to know and really like all of the friends he grew up with. And I said, B, I'm open to learning what you're about. You should be open to learning what I'm about and what my roots are. And like Cornbread Maxwell, he said, hell no. I mean, you're out of Boston. I said, no, but you have to understand that Boston, the fact that you got booed off the court at Boston Garden all these years, that's not really what Boston is about. Yes, it is, by the way. But you need to understand Boston. So finally, I bribed him. He's a Yankee fan. And the Yankees were playing the Red Sox, and he agreed to come up. We went to all 3 games of the Red Sox-Yankee series. I won't tell you what happened in those games. But
Yankees swept them.
But through all of this, we did everything that was Boston. We walked the Freedom Trail. We went to the Gardner Museum. We went up the coast to Rockport and Gloucester, and he ate baked stuffed lobster. He did everything that's New England. And he came away feeling that, Boston is great. But for the pièce de résistance.
I think I said it started with a G. I don't think it was great. I think it was good.
At the pièce de résistance, and this was just serendipitous in a wonderful way. I said, I've got to take you to the North End, which is the Italian section of Boston, and we have to go to a great Italian restaurant. And I called from LA to, first I asked several Boston friends, which is the best restaurant in the North End? And they all gave me various names, but one that was on every list was La Dolce Vita, the Sweet Life, which is a restaurant on Hanover Street, which is the main street in the North End. So I called there and I said, I'm coming from LA with someone who's pretty well known, but I didn't say who it was. Can we have a table that's not in the middle of the restaurant so we don't get hassled? And he said, sure. And we went there, and I'll turn it over to Byron to tell.
You want me to finish the story?
Well, I think that you do a good job on this story.
So the owner, we walk in, he comes up, and I didn't know he was the owner. Charlie didn't either. He comes over and he gives Charlie a big hug. He gives me the old Italian kiss on both cheeks, and he walks away. He said, "I'll be right back. Get you guys' table ready." He walks away. I said, "Charlie, who's that?" He said, "I have no idea." I said, "Oh, okay. So grown men are just coming up to you and kissing you on the cheeks, and they just, okay. All right, Charlie." So the guy goes away. He comes back, and he said, "I got the table ready for you guys." So we go over and we sit in this table, and he starts bringing over wine. He said, "My name is Franco."
And I still didn't say, and B didn't say who he was, so he had no clue.
So he's giving us some wine, and he started bringing food over. And then about halfway through our meal, Franco says, "You know you are sitting in Kobe Bryant's seat." me and Charlie looked at each other. I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes, Kobe Bryant sits here every time he comes to town." I said, "Wow, that's pretty cool." He said, "I'll be right back." He takes off, and I'm going. Charlie said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm texting Kobe." So I text Kobe, and I tell him we're at La Dolce Vita having dinner, and he texts me back in like 10 seconds. He said, "Coach, that's my spot." I said, "Okay." He texts me back. He says, "Tell Franco I said hello and tell him to give you the limoncello when you guys are done with dinner." So, okay. So Franco comes back over, and he's pouring Charlie some wine. He goes to pour me some more, and I said, "Kobe told me to tell you hello." And he, "You know Kobe Bryant?" I said, "Yes, I know Kobe Bryant." "How did you know Kobe Bryant?" I said, "I'm his coach." Of course, I get the old mwah, mwah, And so he says to his waiter, "More wine, come here, bring more wine, go get some more food." So he's feeding us, and now we're about as fat as we can get, And I said, "Franco, food was great, but Kobe also told me to tell you to give me the limoncello." "One limoncello coming up." And he runs back and he brings us limoncellos, we drink it. And then he stands up and he says he wants to take pictures with Charlie and I because he wants to put them up there next to Kobe Bryant. And that was the end of our trip in Boston.
Thank you, Byron and Charlie, very much.
Thank you, guys.